This is a pretty long one. It's fairly involved. We're talking about individuals, groups, and society. This is week 8, chapter 8. So let's go ahead and get started. I don't ask me why I chose this PowerPoint template, but I did. Okay. So there you go. Chapter 8, week 8, individuals, groups, and society. In today's schools, a diverse student body shares classrooms, gyms, and art and music rooms. We are integrating to an extent that is unprecedented in American culture. One of the things that you need to understand or recognize in what was going on in the United States, of course, you guys live on the Navajo Nation, but as the United States was being overrun by Europeans as they came into the United States, they tended to settle in neighborhoods and in towns and farming villages that were fairly homogenous. In other words, there were German towns, there were English towns, there were Swedish towns, there were Norwegian towns, different religious groups would create villages and towns. I grew up in a town that was Methodist. It was that was the dominant uh, uh, religious denomination. It had a Wesleyan church, which is the English, it's the English Methodist Church. It had a EUB church, which was Evangelical United Brethren, which was the German form of the Methodist Church, and then it also had an American Methodist Church. So it was a Methodist town. There weren't any Baptist churches, no Episcopalian churches. Um, uh, no evangelical churches, just had Methodist churches. Really kind of curious. And around the county, in the rural areas, all Methodist churches. So the church closest to our home was a Methodist church. And when we went to the little town where I went to high school, grade school, and high school, it was all Methodist, as weird as that is. So the reality is that back in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, that's the way it was. Most of the places around the United States were not only racially segregated, they were also ethnically segregated to the extent that there were Germans in one town and there were English in the other, and the next town might be a French town or it might be a Norwegian town or a Swedish town. That's just the way it worked. Experts. So what we have now is not only a situation that's ethnically integrated, it's also racially integrated as well. Experts predict that sometimes between 2040 and 2050, our demographic changes will result in the absence of a majority of culture for the first time in the history of the United States. An absence of majority culture. Majority culture right now is the white culture. We're going to talk about that later. How we're going to prepare our students to learn, work, and play in this diverse environment is a question. At a fundamental level, the answer lies in our appreciation, understanding, and respect for individuality. And of course, that has been part of the myth of the United States for an extended length of time. We like to pretend that that people have wanted to be here. They wanted to mix. We weren't segregated to any extent at all. And of course, that's not even close to being true. And never has been through history. American society is a vibrant, dynamic collection of cultures and people. Since the beginning of our country, we have seen continuous changes in our population composition, distribution, and cultural makeup. The second half of the 20th century was especially notable as we saw dramatic changes in immigration trends, family structure, poverty, and cultural representation. Many of these trends are expected to continue throughout the 21st century. This necessitates corresponding changes in education as schools constantly work to meet our diverse societal needs. Diversity is often difficult to define, but at a fundamental level, it is about individuality or difference. People vary in countless ways. Often, however, diversity means differences in ethnicity and race, gender, sexual orientation, intellectual ability, income level, and religious affiliation. Different situations emphasize different diverse dimensions such as athleticism, attractiveness, health, age, and educational level. School systems deal with all these factors as they attempt to provide instruction that is sensitive to every student's needs. As educational institutions strive to deal with greater diversity, they often focus on the concepts of acceptance and mutual respect. This means we need a clear understanding of how people differ and what this means to the educational environment. America is undergoing significant diversification with demographic shifts shaping the nation's social fabric. These diversification trends have far-reaching implications for public education as schools become increasingly diverse in terms of racial, ethnic, linguistic, and socioeconomic backgrounds. But one of the things that we need to remember is this isn't the way it is all over the United States. This may be the way it is in urban areas, but in rural areas, we still have German towns and Swede towns and English towns, especially Scandinavian towns. When I was looking for a teaching job in Nebraska, uh, I applied to one school, and it was a Norwegian town, and they bragged about it. And one of the reasons I wasn't hired, I might have not been as qualified as other people, but one of the reasons that they didn't hire me is because I didn't have a Norwegian name. My name is English. Bradway is an English name. And for that reason, they hired somebody named Olson. So, I mean, that's just the way it works sometimes. So the reality is, you guys live on the Navajo Nation, and you certainly are not, none of these things are true as far as the Navajo Nation is concerned. It's a fairly homogenous school system. You probably do have some people that are not full-blooded Navajo, of course. But the reality is, off the reservation, there is still a lot of segregation. If you go to Holbrook, for example, or you go to Marius Begay, Professor Begay, lives in Snowflake, and his kids are about the only native kids in the school system, and almost everybody in Snowflake is Mormon. As curious, I guess it's not that curious, but this is the kind of thing that we see all over the United States. So the idea that every place is becoming more and more diversified is not exactly true. Understanding and addressing these trends is crucial for creating inclusive and equitable educational environments. America's student population is becoming increasingly diverse with significant implications for public education. Research by the United States Department of Commerce Census Bureau in 2022 highlights the growth of racial and ethnic minority populations, particularly among Hispanic and Asian students. And this is, of course, true in Arizona. It's certainly true in New Mexico and California and in Texas. But the farther away that you get from the U.S.-Mexican border, the less true that is. The diversity brings unique linguistic and cultural considerations that require targeted support and resources for English language. learners, English language learners, ELLs. ELLs is what they're English language learners. An article by Larson et al. In 2018 emphasizes the importance of cultural responsive teaching practices that value and incorporate students' diverse backgrounds and experiences. By embracing diversity, schools can foster inclusive learning environments that celebrate and capitalize on the strengths of all students. Diversification trends in America have also shed light on persistent achievement gaps and educational inequities. Research by Reardon in 2018 highlights the significant disparities in academic achievement between students from different racial and socioeconomic backgrounds. These gaps often stem from structural inequalities such as unequal access to quality educational resources and opportunities. And it's always been this way. It's always been this way. The people with more money were able to buy larger libraries. They had more reference materials. My family was lucky enough, and my family scores very well on standardized tests. Uh, and one reason may be that my mother believed in educating us through information. So we received National Geographic magazine. We got the Saturday Evening Post. We got Life. We got what else? Newsweek and U.S. News and World Report. For a while, we got Time magazine. We were getting all of these magazines that were telling us what was going on in the world. But besides that, if we needed information, we had a set of encyclopedias. The only places you could go to read an encyclopedia was the library or the school. The schools had encyclopedias. We had a set of encyclopedias, and that gave us a real leg up when it came to researching something or finding something out. We'd see something on television, and we'd run to the encyclopedia and look it up, and we could find out information. We could find out information. We didn't have to write it down and take it to school and then go to the library, find time to go to the library and look it up. We could look it up right away. And so we had a fairly extensive library at our home. We had many books in our bookcases at home, and other people didn't have books at home at all. I can remember. Okay, here's a little. in between marriages, I was a single parent for 5 years, and in between marriages, I dated a couple different women, and one woman I was really crazy about. But one of the reasons I didn't marry her is because when I went to her house, she didn't have any books. She didn't have any books, didn't have any magazine. Well, she did. She had People magazine, and that was the only magazine she had in the house. And that made a huge impression on me because I I read all the time, and I had all kinds of books in my house. Even bought my kids a set of encyclopedias. That was the first thing I bought when I started having when my daughter was born was a set of encyclopedias. I wanted to make sure that she had the same advantages that I did. Back then, of course, there was no Google. There was no databases. There was no internet. You couldn't look anything up. So if you needed information, the only way to find that information was to go to an encyclopedia, and it had all the information you needed. And that's actually what Google is, and that's what Wikipedia is, and that's why they call it Wikipedia. Uh, you can look up anything and find it on Wikipedia. When Wikipedia was first developed, it wasn't very accurate. And for that reason, a lot of people said, and I've said that myself, that you can't use Wikipedia uh, as a good source. But it has gotten better. They've cracked down on some of the bogus things that people put on there. Anyway, okay, so let's go ahead and keep going. Um, where were we? These gaps often stem from structural inequalities such as unequal access to quality educational resources and opportunities. Scholars emphasize the need for culturally relevant pedagogy and curriculum that challenge dominant narratives and empower marginalized students. Studies by Darling Hammond in 2016 underscore the importance of equitable funding, targeted interventions, and comprehensive support systems to address achievement gaps and promote educational equity. As America becomes more diverse, there is a growing recognition of the importance of culturally responsive education. Culturally responsive practices acknowledge and embrace students' cultural identities, values, and experiences, creating a more inclusive and engaging learning environment. Research by Gay in 2018 highlights the transformative potential of culturally responsive teaching, which involves pedagogical strategies that connect with students' cultural backgrounds and foster their academic and socio-emotional development. By implementing culturally responsive education, schools can enhance student engagement, academic achievement, and overall well-being. To effectively address the influence of diversification trends in education, teacher preparation and professional development programs must adapt. Research by Villegas and Lucas in 2002 underscores the need for teacher education programs to incorporate culturally responsive pedagogy, preparing educators to work with diverse student populations. Ongoing professional development opportunities that focus on cultural competence and inclusive instructional practices are also crucial. An article by Samuels in 2018 highlights the importance of ongoing training to support teachers in implementing culturally responsive strategies and creating inclusive classrooms. By investing in teacher preparation and professional development, educational institutions can ensure that educators have the knowledge, skills, and dispositions necessary to meet the needs of diverse learners. This is really kind of interesting because most people grow up in a certain place and they know that place and they know the people in that place, so they think everybody is the same. They think everybody's just like where they grew up. But the reality is that's not true at all. Um, I, I raised my kids in the military, and in the military, you never know who's, you move every 3 or 4 years, and you never know who you're going to run into at the next base. So because of that, because my kids were so adaptive at meeting new people, at being around diverse groups of individuals in California, Nebraska, Germany, where else were we? Lubbock, Texas. We were all over the world in essence. When they became teachers, both of my kids taught for a while. My daughter's still teaching. When they started teaching, that it was natural for them. They could accept the community because they were used to seeing different groups of individuals, different cultures, different ethnicities, all over the world, and that helped them to become more well-rounded teachers. And they didn't have expectations like other individuals did. Somebody who's raised in Mississippi thinks that there's just two races in the world, white people and black people, because that's what they saw. That's how they grew up. People in Mississippi, they have two churches. They have the Black Baptist Church and they have the White Baptist Church, and that's about it. I mean, there's not a whole lot else that they've ever experienced. So if they moved to Florida, and my daughter lived in Boca Raton, and that's where she first started teaching. Um, she was the only thing that surprised her was that they had so many Haitian immigrants, and they don't speak Spanish. Everybody else was most of the other immigrants that she encountered were were Spanish speaking, but the Haitians were of African descent, but they spoke French. which was a little different for her. And that's the only thing that really surprised her. Everybody else she had experienced sometime wherever she was around the world, wherever we raised her. Kind of curious. Teachers, psychologists, special educators, medical professionals, speech and language experts, and families are realizing that working collaboratively is a more efficient use of professional talent. Their collective talent far exceeds any individual training and therefore provides an educational team that is in the best position to address a wide range of issues. Appropriately collaborating with other educational professionals efficiency uses resources, efficiently uses resources, creates sensitive instruction, and allows students to benefit from different perspectives and expertise. The benefits of collaborative educational approaches can only emerge when educators remain sensitive to the needs of the students they teach. The best educational team can only be effective if the team members continually strive to better understand the students that they teach. Despite our country's reputation as a melting pot of individuals from different racial, ethnic, and religious backgrounds, our country has always had a clear majority population, and that clear majority population was white Europeans. This makes education easier in one sense, as teachers historically geared educational efforts to this majority. The majority population is Caucasian, Christian, and of European descent. And I have to say, right now, Caucasian wasn't capitalized in the book. I think that's a mistake. Caucasian refers to a certain group of individuals. Um, I mean, Europe was capitalized, and so was Christian, of course, but Caucasian wasn't capitalized. The other thing that I have changed in my lecture from the textbook is that they didn't capitalize white when they were referring to white people. And I think they did capitalize black, but they didn't capitalize white. That just doesn't make any sense to me. I think we need to be respectful of all groups. If we treat everybody as equal, if we treat everybody as equal, maybe we'll actually start treating people as equal rather than, we treat the names of the people as equal. I mean, it would be like not capitalizing Native American or American Indian uh, or Native or Indigenous when we're talking about Indigenous people. It just seems to me that we need to be respectful of everybody. So if it refers to people, a specific group of individuals, immigrant, of course, isn't a specific group of people, it's a general concept. I think we need to capitalize it, and I have done that, and you'll see that through my lecture. Anytime I found white or black not capitalized when it was referring to white and black people, then I have capitalized it. If you'll in your textbook, you'll see that it's not that way. I do not agree with what the textbook has done. This is a point of debate. It has been a point of debate for about 10 years now. And I've always been on the side of we need to respect everybody and make sure that each group is treated exactly the same. And that's one of the reasons why I do that. But okay, Caucasian wasn't capitalized. Caucasian, by the way, is refers to a mountain group. And when you talk about the mountain, of course, you would capitalize it. So why in the world would you capitalize it when it was referring to the people that live in those mountains, Caucasians? Even immigrate, and this is a minor point, but it seems that this is something that we need to do. I'm 75 years old. I've been fighting this whole civil rights thing for 60, 65 years. So this is really important as far as I'm concerned. You guys can do whatever you want, of course. If you hate white people, so you're not going to capitalize white, that's fine. I mean, if you're making a political statement, that's one thing. And I was wondering if he was doing that in the book, But I'm not going to make that political statement because it seems to me that we have enough disagreement in the world. We need to come together and treat everybody as equally as we possibly can. And that includes the words that refer to them. Even immigration trends through the middle part of the 20th century did little to change the makeup of our country because most immigrants came from European countries whose cultural heritage mirrored the American cultural majority. Today, immigration trends are different. The highest rates of immigration are from Hispanic and Asian countries. This immigration shift is quickly bringing about a change in the cultural, racial, and ethnic makeup of the country. These changes necessitate corresponding changes in education. Historically, education has focused on teaching the typical or average student. Differences between students were often overlooked as teachers sought to produce a single best instructional approach. Today, this approach is increasingly problematic because of our diverse American population. Now, remember, if the majority of people are white at your school, then that would be the focus of this instructional approach. There's no longer a typical student, which makes it difficult to envision a single best educational approach. Schools are now moving toward more sensitive and individualized instruction, an approach that varies depending on the unique needs of each student. This approach enhances education in two important ways. At an individual level, it encourages our students to recognize and value their unique qualities, which helps students think about their individual characteristics as strengths and to use them to build a successful educational outlook. It helps our students develop a sensitivity and appreciation of individual differences observed in others, becoming increasingly important as world cultures come together into a global community. The differentiated instruction approach traditionally helps teachers educate in mixed ability classrooms. It helps teachers provide instruction depending on the unique abilities each student brings to the educational environment. Although this approach focuses on academic ability, it encompasses valuable methods applicable to the broader conceptualization of individuality. Differentiated instruction encompasses a variety of elements. At the forefront is the idea that teaching should be proactive. This means teachers should prepare multiple approaches to a lesson, knowing students will have unique learning needs. The teacher delivers the lessons depending on the needs of each student, and because the teacher is proactively prepared to meet these needs, instruction is more productive and effective. The teacher does not wait to see if students need multiple learning paths. The teacher begins with this assumption and prepares accordingly. Some teachers attempt to provide differentiated instruction through adjusting the amount of work to the ability level of the learner. More advanced learners get more work, and students who struggle get less work. Differentiated instruction does not take this quantitative approach. Teachers provide differentiated instruction, make available multiple instructional avenues that differ in the quality of instruction. Instead of limiting the amount of work assigned to the struggling student, a teacher providing truly differentiated instruction would use alternative educational approaches. Differentiated instruction is typically discussed in terms of academic ability. The fundamental characteristics of this approach can be used to address other educationally relevant factors. One of the fundamental concepts of differentiated instruction is to be proactive, preparing multiple instructional plans for a given lesson. Teachers typically create these instructional plans to address learning needs based on ability. Learning is also influenced by ability, ethnic background, social ability, and primary language. Students from different cultural backgrounds may have difficulty with the material not because of the difference in ability, but because they lack the cultural framework. When teachers differentiate instruction, they necessarily provide different educational experiences to students. This is one of the primary goals of differentiated instruction. This difference in instruction introduces the question of whether all students are getting equal instruction. Equality means maintaining similarity or being impartial. Educationally, this has traditionally meant teachers strive to provide similar instruction to all students. This is different from equity, which means freedom from bias. Providing equitable educational services means students have the right to instructional techniques appropriate for their individual learning needs. Teachers should not provide biased instruction against students with unique learning needs. It is critical for teachers to consider this difference between equity and equality. Equality is a concept that runs deep in American culture. It is the foundation for our justice system, and many would argue that it is also a guiding principle behind education. Educational services have grown tremendously in this country. The educational system has moved from its initial conceptualization as a service for relatively affluent males of European descent to a system open to boys and girls of all demographic backgrounds. This contributes to our view that education needs to be equal. It needs to be provided equally to all members of society. Disregard for interpersonal differences is often detrimental to the learning outcomes for students falling outside mainstream society. And this is not this is not brand new. This is not a brand new idea. This has happened in my lifetime. When I started college, I went to an all-male college. At the time, about a third of the colleges in the United States were all male. At the time, Princeton was all male, Harvard, Yale, almost all the Ivy League schools were all male. Columbia wasn't, Pennsylvania wasn't, but most of them were. Um, Miami of Ohio was all male. Notre Dame was all male. The military academies were all male. There were a number of all male colleges in the United States. Now there are only two. There are only two all male colleges in the United States. But in 1967, when I started college, that's the year I graduated from high school, it's the year I started college, there were a number of all male schools, colleges in the United States. A fairly significant number, including all the military academies. And this is just something to remember. I am that old. Okay. Okay. I, I'm 75 years old, but the reality is that equality hasn't been something that we have done in the United States for very long. Um, I was I was just reading a book about the integration of schools in Mississippi, and it was talking about how the black schools were theoretically equal to the white schools. And that was primarily true in the North when there were separate schools. But most black kids went to whatever high school was in the area. They didn't segregate the schools in the North. They segregated them in the South until the 1960s, 1970s, into the 1980s. But in the North, these were all integrated. I was looking at a picture of my Uncle Mont, his high school, well, his eighth grade class, and there were three African Americans in that class, and this, of course, was in Central Indiana. But that you wouldn't see that in the South at that time. My Uncle Mont graduated from high school in 1915. Is that right? Or was it 1918? Anyway, he did graduate from high school. He just made it to the eighth grade. So that would have been 1913, 1914. Anyway, there you go. So, things are different all over the United States. And at the time, of course, they were sending uh, American Indians, Native Americans, to boarding schools, and they were doing the same thing up in Canada. So we talk about equal education. We can probably talk about equal education in urban areas, but not so much in rural areas. Teaching to individual needs requires that educators develop a sense of mutual respect in their classrooms. Students need to develop an educational focus that is not exclusively performance driven, and teachers need to emphasize that every student has a unique learning path. The development of mutual respect is a reciprocal process, with students and teachers learning from each other. Students need to view school as a place to achieve genuine learning. They need to focus on using the available learning tools to master the material. They also need to develop a respect for the teacher and the other students, that they too are invested in his or her learning. Without respecting that everyone in the class is committed to the same end, differentiated instruction becomes competitive. When teachers emphasize the climate of mutual respect, students are more likely to engage in learning and succeed. Mutual respect should be considered one of the founding pillars of educational success. One of the most enduring and controversial topics in education is gender. Gender refers to the psychological, behavioral, and cultural factors related to being male or female. It is typically distinguished from sex, which refers to biological aspects of being male or female. Our sense of being male or female is a complicated interaction between sex and gender and has deep roots in our developmental history. As we learn and grow, we are constantly shaped by events telling us about what it means to be a boy or a girl. Gender identity is the part of you, is that part of you related to the experience of being male or female. It is a personal understanding of your gender. The public expression of your gender is your gender role. You may have a well developed sense of yourself as being female. You identify with other women and feel that you relate well with women. The role you play in society, however, is different. You have chosen to take on more traditionally masculine roles in terms of home life, work, and leisure activities. In this case, we would say your gender identity is female and your gender role is masculine. For most of us, there is a general consistency between our identity and the role that we play in society. It is important to think of masculinity and femininity as points on a continuum rather than either or concepts. Few of us take our gender roles to such an extreme that we embrace none of the characteristics typical of the other gender. Men who work in traditional male jobs and enjoy recreational activities typical of men can also enjoy nurturing and caring for their children, a trait more commonly ascribed to women. So how then do we acquire these roles? Are they biological or learned? Do we simply mimic behaviors we observe in others? Like most answers to questions of human behavior, these are complicated. Much of the difference we see between men and women is the product of differences in testosterone. Both men and women produce testosterone from the adrenal glands, but men also produce large quantities from their testes. Testosterone has been shown to have dramatic effects on behavior. Girls who have exposure to high levels of testosterone while in utero have a birth defect of the adrenal glands. This is known as congenital adrenal hyperplasia, causing uncharacteristic behavior. Girls affected with this condition have been shown to take on more masculine gender roles, engaging in more rough and tumble play, choosing toys more consistent with boys, and showing little interest in feminine clothing, jewelry, and doll play. So, gender related behaviors are mediated by biological factors, though that is not the only cause. And when we're talking about congenital adrenal hyperplasia, these individuals don't always look like females. As a matter of fact, oh, I didn't. I looked at. Okay, I didn't put a picture. These individuals don't always look like females. Okay, because they have so much testosterone. For one thing, they've got facial hair. Another thing is that their menstrual period is very erratic. And if you look at their genitalia, they have elongated clitorises that look like they might be penises. They have deep voices and they have hair growing on their chests. If a male has congenital adrenal hyperplasia, it causes a overly developed penis, as weird as that is. So these individuals look like males. They really do. The female does not have very much breast tissue, and the males look hyper male almost. Learning theorists suggest that much of, and this is a mutation. It's a congenital problem. If it's a female, then they usually are sterile. Males are not, of course, because well, males are not. But yeah, this is an anomaly, something that we don't see all that often. I've seen it. Well, that's not important. But of course, I've worked in medicine for 30 years, so we were seeing this, and I also worked at a children's hospital where anybody that had any kind of genetic problem, potential genetic problem, they came in, and we had to draw blood on them. I worked in the lab. Anyway, learning theorists suggest that much of our sense of being male or female is learned through reinforcing and punishing socialization experiences. Although we are seeing greater tolerances for behaviors that fail to conform to societal norms, there is still ample evidence that boys and girls are rewarded for exhibiting gender-consistent behaviors and discouraged from displaying gender-inconsistent behavior. From the very beginning, we identify individuals as being male and female. As parents, we are more likely to wrestle with our son and play dolls with our daughter. Peers typically have clear boundaries for gender-appropriate behaviors. Chief among these is that boys play with boys and girls play with girls. Children generally demonstrate a preference for playmates of the same sex by age 4. This preference continues to grow through adolescence, where young adults spend about 90% of their time with same-sex friends. This close affiliation with same-sex friends further reinforces and potentially magnifies gender differences. The gender roles we adopt evolve out of an understanding of ourselves as male or female. Lawrence Kohlberg in 1966 developed a theory regarding how we acquire a gender identity. Kohlberg theorized that we begin thinking of ourselves as male or female around 2 or 3 years of age. This is an important milestone because it sets the stage for later gender role development. Although we begin to think of ourselves as belonging to one gender at a fairly young age, we do not consistently identify an individual as male or female until the age of 6 or 7. Young children often confuse actual gender with gender-specific behaviors. It is not until later that children establish gender constancy, or the idea that one's sex is constant regardless of behaviors exhibited. Even after children exhibit gender constancy, there may still be discrepancies between our gender identity and the roles that we adopt. Our gender roles are also influenced by our ideas about gender-appropriate behaviors, or what we call gender schemas. As children develop, they begin to notice which friends are of the same gender. Distinguishing between male and female typically leads to all-girl or all-boy groups. It is within these single-gender groups that children begin developing a sense of gender-specific behaviors. Their understanding of what behaviors are appropriate for a boy or a girl then leads to a change in their actual behavior. What is important to remember is that our gender schemas lead to a differential exposure to the world and ultimately shape the gender roles we adopt as adults. And I think this is a female and with facial hair. That's a little weird, but from looking at her chin and her breast tissue, I would say that that's actually a female, and I'm not sure where she got the facial hair. Much of what we learned during our early years regarding gender-specific behaviors is stereotyped. A stereotype is an oversimplified opinion, attitude, or judgment held by members of a group. Gender stereotypes are vague conceptualizations regarding issues related to one's gender. Ideas regarding what it means to be male and female vary from person to person, but some trends are apparent. As you can see, there are common themes in our perceptions of being male and female. Girls are seen as being more sensitive to interpersonal issues and more emotional. Boys are seen as more active in their play and more independent. The truth about these generalizations depends on the person. Teachers need to keep in mind that personal traits are broad continuums, and everyone expresses some aspect of a given trait at some point in their life. On some days, girls are more likely to engage in rough and tumble play than on other days. Boys may demonstrate care and compassion for a friend today and then move toward fierce independence the next. We are all individuals, so the extent to which these gender trends apply to us will vary. Italians view endurance as a female characteristic, but most other countries see this as masculine. Nigerians see affiliation as neutral, but most countries see it as feminine. This shows that there is a lack of uniformity in gender stereotypes across cultures. The extent to which we hold gender stereotypes varies over our lifetime. In the early elementary school years, gender stereotypes begin to form. Those stereotypes come from a variety of information sources. Parents often have different expectations regarding sons and daughters. Parents often expect and provide opportunities for sons to be independent and explore their environment, while restricting daughters' ability to interact and explore the environment. Toys tend to be sold gender-specific. The boy aisle is usually filled with action figures, trucks, war toys, and sports equipment, while the girl aisle is stocked with dolls, kitchen tools, and items fostering nurturing behaviors. There are many aspects of behavior showing differences between boys and girls, but the two most common are motor preference, performance, and aggression. Motor performance refers to the way in which we use our bodies during activities. Research on gender differences in motor performance usually demonstrates more highly developed skills in boys. Differences begin to show up in elementary school, but are not very large. These differences broaden during the middle school years, with boys outperforming girls in skills areas like jumping, climbing, throwing, and kicking. It is important to remember that these reports refer to group averages and may not apply to individual students. Always exercise caution when applying group data to individuals. Another behavior dimension showing gender differences is aggression. When boys are provoked, they typically show a more aggressive physical response compared to girls. Physical aggression differences are found early in the developmental period and persist into adulthood. Differences are also reported across many cultures. Physical aggression is not the only form of aggression. Another type of aggression is verbal aggression. When verbal aggression is examined for gender differences, results either fail to find any difference or show that girls are more aggressive than boys. Studies looking at relational aggression show differences favoring girls. Relational aggression refers to aggressive acts that manipulate relationships between people. Another way boys can differ from girls is how they think. Researchers have consistently failed to find any differences in overall intelligence. On measures of general cognitive ability, we do not see differences in the performance of boys and girls. We do see gender differences when we look at cognitive performance within a specific academic area. A variety of studies have found boys outperform girls in science. In a 2001 National Assessment of Educational Progress study, researchers found boys perform better on science questions in grades 4, 8, and 12. And these are, of course, the years that they assessed all this information. Similar results were found in 1997 and 2015 study of scientific ability. These differences may have something to do with the number of male role models available in science. More science teachers are male, particularly in the higher grades. This may help male students identify with science teachers, encouraging excellence in that area. Girls do not appear to have as much interest in science compared to boys and experience lower self-concept. It should also be noted that gender differences might be culturally dependent. Research on Asian Americans has not found gender differences in science performance. Differences in math performance favoring boys have also been found, and this is old. Look at that, 1996. That was 30 years ago. Differences, however, may be changing. Newer studies have not found such differences. Such stereotypes appear culturally pervasive. Math differences have been explained by differences in parental expectations. Parents often believe their sons have greater math talent and are better suited to a career in mathematics. Cultural factors also appear to influence gender differences in math. Research shows that African American girls outscore African American boys on math tests. Verbal ability relates to our ability to use and express ourselves in words. Gender differences in verbal ability gained widespread exposure following the publication of the new classic book, The Psychology of Sex Differences by Maccabee and Jacklin in 1974. 1974. That was 50 years ago. Their book provoked the first truly synthesized collection of research based on sex differences. One difference highlighted in the text was a difference in verbal ability favoring girls. Current research continues to provide support for this difference. In 2019, a study conducted using data from the National Assessment and Educational Progress showed girls outperforming boys on reading and writing tests in grades 4, 8, and 12 and were stable over time. Not all evidence paints the same picture, as SAT scores show that there is no difference on verbal section of the test between young men and young women. And I can't understand why she has her book like that. Anyway, let me take a quick drink. Research indicates that there are a variety of differences between boys and girls. The exact explanation for these difficulties may stem from inherent biological differences like hormones, but there is evidence that environmental factors play a significant role. One important environmental factor is a child's teacher. Teachers can positively influence students' gender perceptions of themselves and others. With supportive encouragement, a student can recognize and understand biases based on gender and learn to overcome negative biases. Early research pointed to nurturing both males and female qualities in all students. This is an androgynous approach to gender equity. Androgyny refers to someone who has both masculine and feminine qualities. This approach to gender proved to be difficult. Gender concepts are so deeply entrenched in our society that it was difficult to get students to embrace qualities of the other gender. One study tried to implement an androgynous curriculum for a year with ninth graders and found that boys had even stronger traditional gender role attitudes after the year was completed. And of course, this once again was in 1976. So that was 50 years ago. Today, Some researchers are advocating for gender transcendence. Actually, it was 48 years ago, but we won't talk about that. Gender role transcendence is when we shift our educational focus beyond gender. According to this approach, we do not discount the importance of gender-related issues, but teachers strive to focus on the whole person, not just on being male or female. Linguistic differences or difference in language use are increasingly highlighted in American culture. Teachers are moving toward educational approaches that embrace the increasingly diverse array of student cultural backgrounds. You can travel almost anywhere in the country and clearly recognize different ways of speaking. People across the country use different vocabulary and have different accents. They speak at a different pace or use different gestures while speaking. We are also seeing an increase in the number of languages spoken in our country. Some American regions, like Louisiana, have been using multiple languages since our country's beginning. Remember, Louisiana used to it belonged to the Spanish first, and so they spoke Spanish. But then the Spanish sold it to the French, and eventually Thomas Jefferson bought it from Napoleon. So we've got Spanish, French, and English right there in Louisiana. Other regions like South Florida have seen increases of other languages due to changing immigration trends. And I was telling you about my daughter in Boca Raton. Primarily, they get people from all over the world in that area. She had Japanese students. She had students from Bulgaria and Hungary, but mostly they were Hispanic students. They were students from Puerto Rico. There were which is part of the United States, of course. They had students from Cuba, of course. They had students from South America. They had students from Mexico. And I mention this only because those languages are they all speak Spanish, but they all speak it with a different dialect. South American Spanish is very much different from the Spanish that they speak in Spain. And the people of Puerto Rico speak Spanish like they speak in Spain, as weird as that may seem. Um, and you get different dialects. A lot of places like Bolivia and Ecuador have a mixture of Spanish and some of the indigenous languages, especially Quichua. In Central America, of course, they have the Mayan influence in Central America, especially Guatemala in that area and southern Mexico. Anyway, yeah, there's just a lot of languages that are spoken. These linguistic differences bring with them educational challenges. The focus of this section is to better understand these issues. Real surprise, my son started teaching in Florida. He was in Fort Myers, Cape Coral, actually. And I don't think the school exists anymore. It got wiped out by one of the hurricanes that hit that area. Anyway, I was real surprised. He was considered a bilingual teacher because he had worked in he's a chef, and he had worked in the kitchens, and he had picked up Spanish in the kitchens. Of course, the Spanish that he learned was kind of interesting. He never took a formal class of Spanish, and of course he grew up primarily in Plattsmouth, Nebraska. So he didn't come in contact with anybody who spoke Spanish, but he picked it up and was able to use it in his teaching. So he was he was a commodity. He was very well thought of because he could speak Spanish. Since the founding of our country, the English language has undergone rapid and constant change. Today, Americans invent more new words and phrases in a single month than most countries do in a year. Often changes are bounded by geography, giving us the metropolitan efficiency of the New Yorker, the genteel softness of the Southeast, and the expressive and dynamic rhythms of the inner city urban dwellers. We call these differences different ways of speaking dialects. And there are dialects, and I am from here. This is where I'm from, this green area. This is the Midland dialect. But now I live here, and people in Iowa speak very similar manner to people in the Midland, but it's a little bit different. The North Central, this is really kind of interesting because if you go to Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota, they have almost a Canadian accent where they overpronounce the O's. It sounds almost, Scandinavian if you think about it. People from northern Wisconsin speak one way, and people from southern Wisconsin speak another way. You have two instructors at Fort Belknap, where the hell am I? At Dene College, who are from Wisconsin, and both of them are named Sue. You got Sue Wolf is from Wisconsin, and so is Suzanne Russ. Anyway, they're both Wisconsin Germans, which is kind of interesting. Anyway, they have a Wisconsin accent, and people from Wisconsin claim that they don't have an accent, which is kind of interesting because they overpronounce some of their vowels. Anyway, I won't make fun of people anymore. I've lived here, and I've lived here, and I've lived here, and I've lived here, and here, and here. Where else have I lived? Mississippi. I've lived in California twice, down here around Los Angeles. I lived in Washington, D.C., which is right here. Where else have I lived? I'm from Indiana. Lived in Dayton, Ohio. Montana, of course. We lived right up here on the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation. Is that it? It's close enough. That's enough. Anyway, different dialects in all those different places. Dialects are regional or socially distinct forms of a language having their own characteristic pronunciation, grammar, and vocabulary. I was talking to a lady from South Georgia. Oops, I'm sorry. She's from South Georgia. I used to date her when we lived in Texas. We lived in Lubbock. Anyway, I mispronounced. She was talking. They raise pecans, except they call them pecans. 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 Yeah. And of course, where I come from, they call them pecans. So she was making fun of me because I don't know how to pronounce pecan. Pecans. Anyway, they grow them and sell them. They have, a pecan orchard. Consistent with the inventive nature of Americans, our language styles and techniques are constantly changing and evolving. Why the hell was I talking to a lady from South Georgia? That's where the hurricane went through this area. It went all the way up to Asheville, North Carolina. But her area was hit really hard, and I was concerned about her and her family, of course. And I called her to make sure she was okay. And at the time, they didn't have any electricity or any water, and their telephone was fairly spotty, and they didn't know what was happening. They'd been told that there was another potential hurricane down in the Gulf that might hit them at the end of the week, and that's one of the reasons she asked me to check with the Weather Channel and call her if anything happened. That's why I called her tonight. But don't want you to think I'm being silly. I'm 75 years old. Okay. We dated 50 years ago. Consistent with the inventive. Yeah, I'm going to run away from home at 75. Anyway, consistent with the inventive nature of Americans, our language styles and techniques are constantly changing and evolving. This ever changing nature of language often creates controversy in schools where teachers are charged with teaching English. So, which English are we teaching? In the South, of course, it's going to sound like one thing. In the Midwest, it's going to sound like something totally different. And we're going to talk about the dialects in just a second. But if I have a colleague from Bangladesh, and I helped him move from Indianapolis to Valdosta. That's one of the reasons why I met this lady again after 50 years was because she lives in Valdosta, or she lives in Quitman, which is right next to Valdosta. Anyway, not important. Um, he was up in Salem, Massachusetts, up here, Salem, Massachusetts. And he was complaining about the dialect. He couldn't understand the people up there. They talk too fast. Then he moved to Indiana, where they talk like me, pretty much. And now he's down in Georgia, which is a much slower dialect. And he likes it a lot better because it is a softer dialect. Anyway, this ever-changing nature of language often creates controversy in schools. We don't know which English to teach because they pronounce pecan and pecan. Uh, I'm a Hoosier, so I pronounce it pecan. And my old girlfriend, he says pecan or something like that. The obvious question: in which English do we teach? The form of English taught in schools and typically used in professional circles is referred to as Standard English. This form of English is not clearly defined. Some would argue that this standard form is not really spoken by anyone, but is a merger of all the regional dialects. And of course, people from Wisconsin say, no, it's our dialect. It's the people want to speak like people from Wisconsin. Well, actually, people from Wisconsin, oh, I keep doing that. People from Wisconsin, you can see that people in northern Wisconsin, where Green Bay is, they speak like Canadians, and people in southern Wisconsin, around Madison and Milwaukee's right over here. Oshkosh is right above Milwaukee. This is Madison's right there. That's the state capital. Anyway, they have a northern dialect, and they say that that's standard English. Well, people in Indiana would say the same thing because they live right here, at Fort Wayne. I'm from Muncie. This is Indianapolis right there. Anyway, not important. The number of distinct American dialects is debatable, but most agree that there are at least three: the New England accent, the Southern accent, and the Western General accent. Some experts, and the Western General accent is the whole rest of the United States. You have the South, you have the Northeast, and then you have everybody else speaking another dialect, a third dialect. Some experts list as many as 24 separate and distinct dialects. What distinguishes these dialects are their heritage, pronunciations, and grammar, as well as their use in everyday communication. Additional dialects found in the United States: the A prefix, that's it's a New England accent. African American, Californian, Cajun. I had a friend from Louisiana. I spoke with a Cajun accent. It's very musical. Chicano English, Lumbee, which is a American Indian group in North Carolina. The Midwestern accent, which I have. New York City, Pacific Northwest, Pittsburghese. They have their own dialect. The artful Southern, where they pronounce their R's. There is another Southern dialect where they don't pronounce their R's. Smoky Mountains, Spanglish, and Texan are the other dialects. One of the most prominent of the American dialects is spoken by Americans of African descent. African American English, like all dialects, has a unique vocabulary and grammatical rules. It has different names, and I didn't put them in here because I think that's there is a racist connection to some of these names that they give the African American language. Some black vocabulary words have moved out of ethnically isolated African American groups into the mainstream culture. Fat, for example, means excellent. Bling means jewelry. These are African American dialect words. Other vocabulary terms are still predominantly used within this microculture, like ashy, which means the whitish appearance of dark skin when it's dry. African American English also has distinct pronunciation rules. Often final consonants are omitted from words such as friend instead of friend and wha instead of what. The th sound in math is pronounced like an f, math. And some vowels sounds are, like ride are pronounced with a long ah, rod. And I've never heard that. I've had lots of black friends, but I don't. I've heard them say friend before and math. Uh, what's one of the words? Anyway, it's not coming to me. Grammatical differences include the omission of certain verbs like is and are. Mark playing instead of Mark is playing. Ah, what is it? There's one specific, not energy. What is it? There's a word that's used in Black English that I can't think of right off the top of my head. It's going to come to me as I'm going through this lecture, I'm sure. Cajun English is a regional dialect spoken in parts of southern Louisiana. It is a mixture of influences including French, certain Caribbean islands, and English. That's Shia LaBeouf. He's Cajun, turns out to be Cajun. Doesn't speak with a Cajun accent though. Like I said, I served with a guy who was Cajun from Louisiana. He actually lived on the Gulf, and they were shrimp fishermen. Neither their English nor French conform to a standard form of either language, as both languages evolved along unique paths. Really weird. I went to a small base in Texas, Reese Air Force Base, and when I was there, one of the one of the guys was Cajun, and the guy that was in charge of the lab was from Louisiana as well, but he was African American. He was African American, and he was from Lake Pontchartrain, which is just north of New Orleans. It's actually a lake, one of the larger lakes in the United States. And it was funny because these two guys would start talking to each other, and all of a sudden, they would drift into dialect, and they would start speaking a language that nobody else could understand. I mean, it wasn't French, and it wasn't, but they understood each other. They understood each other, even though the Black Cajun is not exactly the same as White Cajun, as it turns out. Grammatically, Cajun English is different in the use of definite and indefinite articles, and they would start swearing at each other. And it was kind of funny because if they said a certain thing, then both of them would just start laughing like crazy, and you couldn't understand what they were saying. Will you have a coffee instead of will you have some coffee? But it is the pronunciation that gives Cajun English its most recognizable qualities. Cajuns routinely change diphthongs like hi, which uses the combined sounds of ah, to monophthongs. Hi would be pronounced as ha. Uh, that doesn't really. You have to hear it spoken to understand what they're talking about. Cajuns also typically alter the th phoneme using a t or a d instead of dat instead of that. As with African American English, Cajun English is a unique rule governed and systematic deviation from standard English forms. And since we're talking about it, here, let me go to, let's see if we can hear somebody speaking Cajun English. Oops. Come on. My internet's slow. Okay, well, we'll just go back. Sorry. It's important that students have the linguistic tools to be successful in the professional world and the language rules in that venue. Moving back and forth from a dialect to the more standard form of the language has been termed code switching. Code switching also refers to a change from a formal language that you might use in business to an informal language you use with friends. And of course, we've heard Barack Obama do it. He does it all the time. He's actually from Hawaii and was raised partially in Indonesia, but he doesn't have a very strong African American accent. But sometimes when he's speaking to a black audience, he will code switch. And at that time, of course, he sounds a little bit different. He uses more dialect words and speaks it differently. Of course, Michelle, his wife, is from Chicago and speaks a black dialect. When I was in college, of course, we referred to that dialect as Black Patois. Patois meaning dialect, actually. It's French for dialect. But I guess that has fallen out of favor. The word patois has, anyway. In addition to giving students the tools to code switch effectively, teachers can also help students appreciate the incredible history and linguistic complexity behind a dialect. Appreciation of the history of a dialect gives students another vehicle with which to, and there's a word for you, vehicle. That's the way it's actually pronounced. A lot of people will say vehicle because it's got an H in it. It looks like vehicle, but the H is silent. So that's a dialect word. And a close examination of dialectical structure helps students understand language in general. Teachers can also help students appreciate dialectical differences by dispelling common myths regarding dialects. Civil rights legislation during the 1960s left school systems with two options for educating children with limited or no English-speaking ability. The first is to provide a special form of English instruction which is sensitive to their limited English experience. This has become known as English as a second language instruction, and my son was doing that, teaching math classes to people that couldn't speak English. So he was the ESOL math teacher. The other option is to teach, and you would think that he would get extra money, but they didn't give him any extra money. Oh, that's good. Okay. I was just checking my internet. The goal of these programs is to develop English proficiency, but to use native language instruction to support educational progress while English skills are developing. And these are known as bilingual education, where something is taught in two different languages, English and whatever the other language is. ESL instruction is favored in school districts where there are large numbers of students speaking a variety of languages. In these school districts, the sheer number of languages makes it impossible to use a bilingual educational model. A lot of places in Texas, for example, English and Spanish are the two languages that are being spoken, so they could use a bilingual educational model. But in places like Florida, where there's French from Haitian, Japanese, they had Arabic. My My daughter's neighbor was Iranian, and he spoke Farsi or Persian, as it were. Anyway, so it was tough in Florida because there are so many different languages being spoken. Bilingual education is more typically used when you have a significant population of students who have a common non-English native language, like in Texas. In this country, bilingual education is more typically used with Spanish speaking students in Florida and in southern states bordering Mexico. Bilingual education, yes, that may be true, but not in Boca, because Boca was a very popular town. Fort Lauderdale has a lot of immigrants from different places, but potentially places like Miami, where there were a lot of Cuban immigrants. Um, then you could use bilingual education in the Miami area because there are so many Spanish speaking people. In both ESL and bilingual programs, the goal is to help students achieve proficiency in oral communication used in everyday conversations, contextualized language skills, and in academic skills used in completing course material, contextualized language skills. Educators recognize the importance of both skills. I can read Spanish, and but I can't speak Spanish. When I was in California, I took Spanish, 2 years of Spanish in high school and 2 years of Spanish in college. And I speak Spanish like somebody from Indiana. So when I went out, I thought I could, at least pronounce words. I could read Spanish. So when I went out to California, we did educational research, and we were going to the high schools, and we were naming all these students. We had to call them, had to read off their names, and I'll tell you, they just didn't like me pronouncing any of those words. They said I spoke like a Hoosier. You speak like a hick. And it was kind of funny because, well, I had taken 4 years of Spanish. So theoretically, I knew how to pronounce the words, but I couldn't speak, I couldn't pronounce people's names. Um, Evidently, I didn't speak it right. I didn't use the right accent. Now, the funny thing was that there was a lady from Spain who I was working with, and they made fun of the way that she pronounced the names as well, because she didn't pronounce them. Most of the people in Los Angeles were of Mexican descent or South American or Central American descent. And they speak Spanish differently. South American Spanish is different than Castilian Spanish, which is and Catalonian, which is spoken in Spain. So this lady, they made as much fun of her as they did of me. Of course, they referred to me as a hick, but they're pretty much right. I have a difficult time speaking Spanish. It's a lot faster, I don't speak it fast enough in order to pronounce it correctly. Educators recognize the importance of both skills, bilingual and ESL. Parents and families eager to assimilate into American culture often value these English skills to the exclusion of their native language and culture it represents. Teaching students for whom English is a second language is not just about instruction and academic skills. Language is invariably tied to a specific culture. So when you teach a new language, you are also teaching a different culture. This presents unique challenges to students adapting to American life. Some students and their families struggle to maintain their identity while learning American culture. Both are clearly important for these students. Students need to feel that their unique qualities are valued. They also need to appreciate the culture of their own country and how to effectively operate within an American cultural framework. The common term used to refer to traditional family structure is a nuclear family. A nuclear family is a family unit consisting of a mother, father, and their children, just like what we see right here. A distinction is typically made between a family of orientation, which is the family unit we were in as children, and the family of procreation, which is the family we participate in as parents. In the nuclear family, the husband and wife share in the creation of the home. Together, they earn money, keep the house, and raise and nurture the children. Historically, the division of these tasks has been rigidly divided along gender lines. This promoted the gender roles discussed earlier. These roles are becoming more flexible, but still support gender based perceptions regarding typical home life. All family units have their share of problems and successes, and traditional nuclear families are no exception. There is evidence that children from this type of home environment are not as likely to develop behavioral and educational trouble. According to a 2002 study on family structure, children who live with both of their biological parents have the lowest risk for childhood problems. The finding is a robust and consistent developmental finding. A teacher might conclude that a student whose parents are divorced are destined for trouble. Now remember, this was in 2002. That was 22 years ago. This is one of the most common problems with the application of research findings. The student whose parents are divorced might be at greater risk, but that does not mean that they will have trouble. The data cited above is about general trends present in our society. Whether individuals will experience trouble for which they are at risk depends on a variety of factors. It is also important to appreciate that a significant percentage of children from traditional two parent homes also experience behavioral and academic difficulties. Teachers should be aware of trends, but cautious in their application to individuals. A network of relatives often supports the nuclear family. Extended family members are relatives of the nuclear family that share the emotional and often financial functions of the family. The involvement of the extended family is highly variable. Involvement is frequently supported by cultural traditions within the family. This is especially prominent in American families from Italian, Asian, and Native American descent. In these families, members are often socialized to consider the needs of the family before their own. Given the number of people involved in an extended family, certain members of the family are often given managerial roles for distribution of financial assets, socialization of the children, and general family dynamics. Families where this role runs to the mother's side of the family are called matriarchal families, just like uh, people, the Dene people are matriarchal. Families where the father's side of the family plays this role are patriarchal families. Families where everyone shares family roles equally are called egalitarian families. Worldwide, patriarchal families are more common. In America, egalitarian families are more common. Back in the 1950s, when Father Knows Best was the most popular television show on television, we were a patriarchal we had a patriarchal structure in the United States. Having a well integrated extended family can have enormous benefits. There are more hands to help with children. This gives parents more time to devote to their relationship. Parents who have a healthy, low conflict relationship better support happy, well adjusted children. Extended families can also provide a larger financial support structure. Thus, when the families experience financial hardship, family assistance is spread across multiple people. This eases the burden on any one family member. Not everything is positive for extended families. With more people, there are usually more opinions and the resulting potential for more conflict. Developing clear lines of authority is one approach to managing a larger family. The extended family model was the most common model in early American history. As our society became more industrialized, We also became more mobile, and extended families were not able to maintain close integrated contact over great distances. Another important factor in the reduction of the involvement of extended family members is the significant divorce rate in our country. Divorce can complicate a child's involvement with extended family members. And of course, I was around when they legalized divorce. Divorce was pretty much illegal around all over the United States into the 1960s. So if before 1960, divorce was pretty much illegal, just about everywhere, except in Nevada, strangely enough. And then in the 1960s, birth control, they developed birth control, and they also liberalized the divorce laws, which is I'm thankful for because I was able to get rid of my first and second wives, and I've been married for 45 years, okay? Or is it 46? Wait a minute. 45. I've been married for 45 years. So the 2019 U.S. Census Bureau American Community Survey indicates that 2.7 million children are living in grandparent-headed households, and an additional 1.7 million are living with grandparents with a parent present. Intergenerational child rearing is the practice of rearing children by grandparents. Kinship rearing is the more general term used to refer to children reared by family members other than the child's parents. Children in households with grandmothers only and no parental involvement are most likely to be poor and to receive public assistance. Children in households with both grandparents and no parental involvement are the most likely to be uninsured. These qualities are usually driven by the reasons behind the intergenerational rearing situation. And you might wonder, what's going on with the grandparents? Why aren't they buying insurance for the grandchildren? And the answer is the grandparents have insurance. They have Medicare. But the children don't have insurance because the grandparents tend to be on fixed incomes and they can't afford to buy insurance for the kids. These qualities are usually driven by reasons behind the intergenerational rearing situation. The most common explanation for why these children are in the care of their grandparents include increased drug abuse among parents, teen pregnancy, divorce, increases in single parent homes, mental and physical illness, AIDS, and child abuse. 7.6 million children in the United States are living with one or more or both grandparents. 7.6 million. At one point, my parents almost took my brother's children because he was being abusive, and my parents told him, if we see any more marks on these kids, you're going to lose those kids. I can promise you. And that was it. He got rid of his anger somehow. My youngest brother. Another non-traditional family structure involves parents of the same gender. The union of individuals of the same gender has been the subject of many articles in the popular press as states wrestle with the legal issues surrounding these unions. We are also seeing greater attention given to children living in these unique families. Considerable research has been conducted on the effects of same-sex parents on the development of the children. The research supports that these families have much in common with more traditional family structures. Studies of early childhood psychosocial development find few, if any, differences between families with same-sex parents compared to opposite-sex parents. This also appears to be the case as children of same-sex parents grow into adolescence. Adolescent differences in perceptions of parental warmth, autonomy, and integration into the neighborhood, and academic success seldom vary according to whether one has same-sex parents. Regardless of the family type, it was closeness with the parents that predicted positive school outcomes. And right here, I need to tell you what the argument was. The argument was that same-sex parents, whether it was the parents were female or male, they would teach the children to be gay. That was the idea. That was the fear, anyway. Or that the especially the male gay males would rape the children. That was another fear. This goes way back. This goes back when I was getting my divorce. My wife left, and she left. And when she left, she went back home. I was in Texas. I was in the Air Force. I was in Texas, and she was in Indiana. And so I had the kids. And so when I went to get the divorce, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, it made sense that I got the divorce, but it was contested by the state. And the reason the state contested my divorce was because I had custody of the children. If I had been a female, they would have let me have my children without any question. But because I was a male, I was considered unfit to be a parent because males can't be good parents. That was the idea anyway. This was in Texas in the early 1970s. The other problem was that my oldest child was a female, and the judge that was hearing my case decided that because I was a male and she was a female, that I would molest her. And he said that in court. He was an old Baptist minister, son of a bitch. But anyway, not that he was. That was okay. Anyway, as it turned out, they were going to take my kids away because men cannot take care of children. That's what this old fart said. But the way I won the case was the fact that my children were not citizens of the state of Texas. My children were officially citizens of the state of Indiana. In Indiana, and in Indiana, they would allow males to raise children alone. If my wife had died, there wouldn't have been a question. But because we were getting a divorce, the state got involved, and the state tried to take my children away from me, and they didn't. Anyway, that was back in the 70s. It was one of the first cases of a man being awarded. They actually didn't award my children to me. What they did was they left me alone because they couldn't take the children. They would have had to have gotten permission from the state of Indiana, since my children were citizens of the state of Indiana, because that's where they were born. Um, that's where their birth certificates were from. We were just visiting Texas because I was in the military there. Anyway, crazy stuff. And strangely enough, I didn't molest my daughter, and she turned out everything. Everybody turned out okay. My son is making six figures in Washington D.C., and my daughter teaches science in in Clinton, right here in Iowa. Everybody's happy. Few school systems offer specialized support for families with same-sex parents. Societal comfort levels regarding non-traditional families is growing, but there are still significant political and religious belief systems which discourage open and direct support for the unique needs of these families. Despite the often charged socio-political climate surrounding same-sex parents, teachers need to place the educational needs of the child first. This means teachers need to gather relevant information regarding the unique needs of these children and their families and support the child's educational progress. And the only reason I mention my own situation is I'm not in a gay relationship. Certainly, but at the time I was a single parent, and the state of Texas tried to take my children away. So it was a socio-politically charged climate at the time. Uh, People were angry. I had to stay on base. I mean, I couldn't go off base because my picture was in the paper, and the judge was screaming, and editorials were being written. Anyway, the people on base were going, "What the hell's going on?" Because they were from all over the United States and they had never heard of that kind of backwards thinking. Anyway, not important. Another group of students teachers will encounter are from divorced homes. The actual number of marriages ending in divorce is commonly reported as somewhere between 40 and 50% based on statistics from the National Center for Health Statistics. This estimate is usually based on the total number of marriages per 1,000 people divided by the total number of divorces per 1,000 people. In 2022, there were 5.1 marriages per 1,000 and 2.3 divorces per 1,000 people. This approach may lead to an inflated divorce rate because the people getting married are not necessarily the same people getting divorced. Other approaches to calculating the divorce rate led to a more conservative estimate of about somewhere around 41%. But that was 20 years ago. Regardless of divorce, still affects millions of American families and potentially has a variety of negative educational outcomes. Child adjustment following divorce depends on several factors. Children appear to handle divorce better when parents maintain a positive relationship, quality schooling is present, and parents can meet their financial obligations. Children also appear to fare better when parents and the school encourage independence while still providing limits and control of their actions. Boys have higher rates of behavior problems, and girls have increased difficulty in their interactions with boys following divorce. Adjustment is highly individual. Some children and adolescents respond to divorce with greater maturity and an increased ability to cope with issues. As one would expect, the first 2 years are particularly problematic for children, but 3 out of 4 children adapt and become well adjusted. In addition to the general trends in child development following divorce, there are significant environmental and family structure changes. Children find themselves moving from a two-parent home to a home where only one parent is available. A 2023 U.S. Census Bureau report indicated that there are approximately 9,767,000 one-parent families with children under 18 years of age. One-parent households present many challenges to both parent and child. There is often a substantial decrease in the amount of time the parent has available to spend with the child because they are trying to run the household, establish new adult relationships, and deal with child issues like homework, birthday parties, play dates, etc. Play dates. I never had my children go out and play with people like that. We just went outside and played. Another issue these one-parent families often face is remarriage. Approximately 2 out of 3 single parents will remarry following divorce, and about half of these marriages will again result in divorce. Blended families refers to families where single parents who remarry create step relations and potentially half-sibling relationships. These families bring new adjustment issues as children accommodate to yet another living situation. There is no easy formula for helping children adjust to a divorce, but there are some general guidelines. One of the most consistent findings is that open and frequent communication between parents and between parent and child greatly increases the probability of successfully resolving divorce-related issues. Families should also ensure that everyone remains invested and engaged in the family. Family time should be prioritized because this provides opportunities for bonding and shared growth. Extended family members and teachers can also become important resources as these children adapt to their new circumstances. Socioeconomic status relates to economic differences between individuals and families. It also relates to prestige, power, and political influence. Reported divisions in social class vary depending on the source, but typically include some grouping of upper class, middle class, and lower class. Frequently, these broad categories are further subdivided to provide a more accurate representation of the individuals within these classes. Poverty is a significant issue in the United States with profound implications for the well-being and future prospects of individuals. To provide some perspective on the problem, consider that across the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, which is a unique forum where the government of 37 democracies within market-based economies, including New Zealand, Spain, the United Kingdom, and the United States, collaborate to develop policy standards to promote sustainable economic growth, and the United States is consistently ranked as having one of the highest rates of poverty. And there we are. Highest rates. We are second only to Israel. And why is Israel so high? Because they have so many Palestinians living in Israel. And they have a hard time finding jobs. They're also segregated. This is one of the reasons. This is one of the things that happened with Gaza. This is one of the reasons that there was such an explosion. October 8th of last year, when the Hamas came out of Gaza and attacked the Israelis and killed 3,000 Israelis. Anyway, that had to do with the Palestinian issue, and that's the reason they have higher poverty level than we do in the United States. And you can see everybody else is way ahead of us. Everybody, except for Israel. According to 2022 official poverty measurements for children under 18 years of age, Black individuals 22.3%, Hispanic 21.7%, and American Indian Alaska Native 26.6%, children have higher rates of poverty compared to their white counterparts, which is only 13.5%. Explanation for this discrepancy center on historical inequities, systematic discrimination, disparities in educational quality and access, employment and wage gaps, discrepancies in health access, and in some cases, cultural and linguistic barriers. It is important to note that 23% of female householders are living in poverty compared to 5% for households with married couples. And of course, the group they're talking about as far as the linguistic barriers is concerned are Hispanics. There are some American Indians that speak their native tongue rather than English before they speak English. But if you go to the Northern Plains, you go to Oklahoma, you go to places other than the Navajo Nation, this is a rarity. Most people speak English before they speak, even indigenous people speak English before they speak their native language. And they have to learn their native language later. But some select tribes are much better at this than others. The Crow, for example, have a high Crow literacy rate. There are some Lakota bands that have high Lakota literacy rates. But for the most part, indigenous people are not learning their native tongue. I know this. I've been all over Indian country, and I can tell you that the Dene are unique because you are lucky that your language is so strong. You really are. You're very fortunate. There are other groups that have strong linguistic skills. Like I mentioned the Crow before, but where I was, I was at Fort Belknap, and they were just starting an immersion school there when I got there. When I arrived there in 2011. So, no, 2001. I left there in 2011. Okay. Wow. Got my years mixed up. There are a variety of factors suspected to promote the high poverty rate in the United States. Raising children is expensive, and some reporting that the cost of raising a child could, over time, exceed $200,000 on average. $200,000, I think that's in a lifetime, however. This cost is made more difficult. I don't know. I'm not sure what the 2000 refers to. They were talking about this in the debate last night. And Vance did a good job of talking about how they wanted to change the family dynamic so that wouldn't be the case. But don't always believe what people say. They say one thing, they do something totally different. This cost is made more difficult to afford because of rising inequality and growth of earned income. Of total household income, society's poorest 20% receive only 3%, compared to the wealthiest 20% who receive more than 50%. This inequality is realized through low wages. Low wage earners suffer more from occupational segregation, leading to wage gaps. Available jobs are undervalued and underpaid. Racial differences do exist in this SES and socioeconomic status. Workers receiving poverty-level wages include 19.2% of Hispanic workers, 14.3% of Black workers, 10.9% of Asian workers or Pacific Island workers, compared to 8.6% for white workers. Such challenges in the working lives of parents naturally lead to the difficulties for their children. Now, one of the things that we need to understand is, we got really high levels here. Hispanic workers 19.2%, 14.3% for Black workers, 10.9% of Asian workers, and 8.6% of white workers. But there is a huge majority of the people that are making low wages are white. Now, how is this true? Well, there's 70% of the population of the United States are white. So 8.6% of 70% is a lot higher than 10.9%. No, it's the 14.3% of 13%, or 19.2% of 15% of the population. So if we had to draw a picture of a poor wage earner, it would have to be somebody that was white. There's just a large number of white people that are poor because there are more white people in the United States. Such challenges in the working lives of parents naturally lead to difficulties for their children. They're more likely to attend under-resourced schools, live in neighborhoods where residents are not invested in their properties, experience negative health outcomes, and are more likely to become involved in the criminal justice system. The result of these experiences often leads to life challenges for parents and students. The influence of socioeconomic status on educational experiences is a widely recognized and extensively studied phenomenon. Socioeconomic factors, including income, parental education, and occupation, can significantly impact a student's educational journey. Students from high socioeconomic backgrounds often enjoy certain advantages in their educational experiences. They typically have access to high-quality schools with abundant resources, smaller class sizes, advanced technology, and well-trained teachers. Why? Because the teachers are paid better. These advantages create a conducive learning environment and provide opportunities for personalized attention and enrichment activities. I was telling you that I called an old girlfriend from South Georgia. Her daughter teaches elementary school down in Florida. And in Florida, they don't make very much money. But she was saying that she thinks she's going to have to move home because they can't make enough money in Florida. But the reality is that they make even less money in Georgia. My daughter got a $20,000 raise when she moved from Florida to Iowa because they pay so much better in Iowa. And the schools are better. Why? Why are the schools better in Iowa? My goodness, I thought Florida was a paradise when it's not being hit by a tornado, by hurricanes. But the reality is they pay really bad wages, and people don't stay in the school system in Florida because they can't make enough money to live. But you can in Iowa. Cost of living is cheaper in Iowa, and the wages are higher. So anyway, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds face numerous challenges that can hinder their educational experiences. They often attend under resourced schools where limited funding leads to outdated materials and insufficient support services. These students may lack access to technology, textbooks, and extracurricular activities, limiting their exposure to a well rounded education. Public schools typically rely on property taxes for funding. This leads to generous funding for wealthier areas and leaves poorer areas struggling to meet student needs. The lack of necessary funding also leads to lower teacher salaries. This leads to higher teacher turnover and the subsequent employment of newer, less experienced teachers. It also leads to the liberal use of substitutes. The teacher problem is compounded by larger class sizes. Factors such as unstable housing, food insecurity, and inadequate health care can add additional stressors that impede academic achievement. Achievement is also likely to be influenced by the expectations of the teacher. Teachers tend to expect less of students from lower socioeconomic levels. They wait longer for high socioeconomic status students to answer questions. They also are more likely to give high socioeconomic status students a second try to answer a question and to provide more praise. This differs from how teachers often address students with lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Lower expectations for students from low socioeconomic status backgrounds may lead students to develop a negative self perception. The educational experiences of students are undeniably influenced by their socioeconomic status. Students from high socioeconomic backgrounds often benefit from privileged access to resources, while those from low income households face numerous challenges that hinder their educational journey. By implementing targeted interventions addressing socioeconomic inequalities and fostering an inclusive learning environment, we can work towards reducing the disparities and ensure every student has an equal opportunity to succeed. It is through these collective efforts that can create a more equitable and empowering educational system, enabling students from all economic levels to thrive and reach their full potential. Education is a fundamental pillar of social and economic development, empowering individuals to thrive in their personal and professional lives. The reality is that a family's socioeconomic status plays a pivotal role in shaping educational outcomes for children. This includes a variety of family factors influenced by socioeconomic status. Families from different socioeconomic status levels appear to have different educational values and expectations. High socioeconomic status families often possess greater financial resources, access to quality education, and a broader range of opportunities for their children. These advantages significantly impact children's skill development, facilitating achievement. These families actively teach their children qualities like restraint, self discipline, and responsibility. This leads to children who are more academically successful. High socioeconomic families can afford to enroll their children in reputable schools and provide them with resources such as tutors, specialized dresses, and extracurricular activities that enhance cognitive and non cognitive skills. Children from high socioeconomic status families often have access to educational materials, technology, and books that foster intellectual growth and curiosity, creating an environment conducive to learning and skill acquisition. High socioeconomic status parents are also more likely to be actively engaged in their children's education, providing guidance, encouragement, and resources that promote academic success. Having greater freedom from worries about daily life, children from middle class homes are taught to focus on the future. They are encouraged to think about their life plan and the consequences of their actions. Consequences for inappropriate behavior are typically non physical, which encourages thoughtfulness instead of fear. All of this leads to greater skills supporting academic success for students from higher socioeconomic backgrounds. Students who are thoughtful, feel safe, and focus on the results of their behavior are more likely to do well in school. In contrast, children from low socioeconomic backgrounds face unique challenges that impact their educational focus and hinder skill development. Parents in lower socioeconomic status levels typically focus on the behavior of the child rather than the child's attitudes and ideas about academic success. This gives the child knowledge that what behaviors are expected, do your homework, but fails to give them an appreciation of how these behaviors are linked to success through qualities like self-discipline. Families from lower socioeconomic levels often have difficulty meeting the demands of daily life. To help them cope, parents encourage children to help maintain the home, take care of younger siblings, and provide for themselves. Low socioeconomic status families often lack financial resources to invest in high quality education, educational materials, and extracurricular activities, limiting opportunities for skill development. Parents with lower socioeconomic status may have limited time and resources to actively engage in their children's education due to work demands, lack of education themselves, or other daily life challenges. Children from low socioeconomic families, socioeconomic status families, are more likely to experience stressors such as poverty, housing instability, and inadequate health care, which can have negative effects on cognitive development and academic performance. Family socioeconomic status significantly influences educational opportunities and outcomes for children, as we have just seen. The high socioeconomic status families have the means and provide their children with enriching educational experiences, fostering skill development, and facilitating academic achievement. Children from low socioeconomic backgrounds face unique challenges that impact their educational focus. Addressing these disparities requires concerted efforts to provide equitable funding, early intervention programs, and community partnerships. Ethnicity is a frequent topic of discussion in schools. This is in part due to the inherent qualities of a public system of education. Since schools are open to all, students are likely to encounter students from differing cultural backgrounds. Bringing together individuals from different cultures is potentially an excellent opportunity to learn about human differences, but only if teachers help students understand the differences they observe. All too often, students use differences in negative ways. Differences can lead to inappropriate groups, resulting in some students feeling included and others feeling disliked. Encouraging students to view differences in a positive way helps students learn and grow as human beings. They are they also they are also in a better position to become active participants in our remarkable global community. This section looks at ethnicity, discusses its relation to race, and reviews what we know about ethnic trends. Race refers to a group of people with biologically inherited traits viewed as socially significant. These biological traits commonly refer to skin color, nose and lip shape, and hair texture and color. Ethnicity refers to any distinguishable group of people who have common culture. The distinguishing qualities vary from group to group and may include geographical location, physical attributes, or cultural traditions. Race and ethnicity, according to these definitions, are separate constructs. Individuals from Black, Hispanic, and American Indian Alaska Native backgrounds live in poverty in greater proportions than white students. The disproportionately higher number of children from these backgrounds living in poverty and the difficulties they experience in daily living frequently leads to a disproportionately higher number of academic problems. For example, the lack of security experienced by students in high crime areas likely contributes to greater reports of being afraid of attack or harm during the school year. Lack of feeling safe at school is likely to have a negative influence as students focus on their need for safety rather than their academic studies. Wait a second. Okay, let me get rid of that. Okay, I think it's telling me to do something. Anyway. This relates to the safety needs discussed by Abraham Maslow. Fear and related stresses are only a small part of the overall picture. Academic success of students from ethnic minorities may be negatively impacted by a variety of other factors. For example, students from ethnic minorities are more likely to experience teen pregnancy, come from single parent homes, have less qualified teachers, and have parents with less than a high school education. All these factors impact the potential for academic success. Students at risk exhibit several characteristics that contribute to their educational challenges. Students at risk may struggle to form positive relationships with peers and teachers. They may experience social isolation, feel disconnected from the school community, and have limited opportunities for meaningful social interactions. Students at risk may also struggle with low self-esteem and have a negative perception of their academic abilities. They may lack confidence in their own capabilities and believe that they are incapable of academic success, leading to a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure. These students often have a history of underachievement, struggling to meet grade level expectations, and experiencing persistent academic difficulties. They may demonstrate poor performance, lower standardized test scores, and lack foundational skills necessary for their academic success. Students at risk may frequently have attendance problems, including chronic absenteeism or truancy. They may miss a significant number of school days, leading to gaps in their learning and difficulty catching up with their peers. Many students at risk face emotional issues or behavioral problems that impact their ability to engage in school effectively. These challenges can manifest as externalizing behaviors, aggression, impulsivity, or internalizing behaviors, anxiety and depression, hindering their social interactions and academic progress. Students at risk may come from disadvantaged backgrounds with limited support systems at home. They may face socioeconomic challenges, unstable family environments, or lack of access to resources that support their educational success. At risk, students often experience a lack of psychological attachment or disengagement from the educational setting. They may feel disconnected from school and lack of sense of belonging, which leads to decreased motivation and engagement. One of the most devastating outcomes for students at risk is dropping out of school. In short term, students who drop out often face limited employment prospects and lower earning potential compared to their peers who graduate. They may also struggle to find stable employment, leading to financial difficulties and a higher risk of poverty. The long-term consequences of dropping out are far-reaching. Individuals who do not complete their education face higher rates of unemployment, increased dependency on social welfare systems, and decreased access to quality health care. High dropout rates contribute to economic disparities, hinder national productivity, and perpetuate cycles of poverty within communities. Finding ways to intervene with the dropout problem is challenging, but there are techniques based on research in the area. Tailoring interventions to meet the specific needs of students at risk is essential for their success. Individualized support may include targeted interventions for academic difficulties, social and emotionally skilled development, and addressing behavioral challenges. Providing personalized instruction, offering academic counseling, and implementing evidence based interventions can promote positive outcomes. The creation of safe learning environments for students at risk. It includes implementing positive behavior management strategies, fostering a supportive school climate, and ensuring physical safety. Research suggests that strong teacher student relationships promote engagement, motivation, and academic achievement. Encouraging regular communication, providing individualized attention, and offering mentorship opportunities can foster these relationships. These kinds of relationships are at their best when realized in a setting with high academic expectations and where teachers maintain rigorous standards. Research shows that challenging coursework and high expectations promote student engagement and achievement. Implementing differentiated instruction, providing academic support, and promoting a growth mindset can help students connect with learning. Collaborating with families, community organizations, and support services can also provide comprehensive support for students at risk. A stereotype threat is the phenomenon in which individuals, when aware of negative stereotypes associated with their social group, experience anxiety and concern about confirming these stereotypes, leading to a decrease in performance and achievement. Extensive research has shed light on the detrimental effects of stereotype threat on various domains, including academic, sports, and workplace settings. Understanding stereotype threat and implementing effective strategies to mitigate its impact is crucial for fostering a fair and inclusive society. Stereotype threat can significantly affect individuals' performance and achievement. Research has consistently demonstrated that individuals under stereotype threat exhibit diminished cognitive functioning and reduced work memory capacity. The anxiety induced by stereotype threat diverts cognitive resources, leading to impaired performance. Studies have shown that stereotype threat can negatively impact academic achievement, standardized test scores, job performance, and even physical performance in sports. 2921. Who would have thought? Oh, okay, so how do we protect against stereotype threat? Protecting against stereotype threat, increasing awareness. Educating individuals about stereotype threat and its consequences can be an effective first step. By understanding the mechanisms behind stereotype threat, individuals can recognize when they are affected by it and develop strategies to overcome its impact. Encouraging positive role models. Providing exposure to successful individuals from underrepresented groups who defy negative stereotypes can help counteract the effects of stereotype threat. Role models serve as powerful sources of inspiration and demonstrate that success is not limited to stereotypes. Promoting a growth mindset. Cultivating a growth mindset, the belief that abilities can be developed through effort and practice, can counteract the negative effects of stereotype threat. When individuals adopt a growth mindset, they are more likely to view challenges as opportunities for growth rather than threats to their abilities. Creating supportive environments. Establishing inclusive and supportive environments can mitigate stereotype threat. Encouraging diversity, promoting positive intergroup interactions, and fostering a sense of belonging can help individuals feel valued and reduce stereotype threats' impact. Coming to a sense of one's own cultural or ethnic background is difficult. It also appears to differ depending on whether your ethnic background is consistent with that of the majority culture. For individuals from ethnic minority backgrounds, their identification process begins with an immersion into a particular culture grounded in the family unit. They live, work, play in a particular setting with unique rules, values, traditions, and often religious beliefs. This process is generally supportive and builds confidence in the individual. Individuals from these minority backgrounds ultimately need to resolve their unique cultural qualities with that of the majority culture. Comparing one's culture to the majority culture is frequently a negative process as minorities receive less than positive messages from movies, television, and print material. It is interesting that there really is not a comparable process for individuals from the majority culture. In the United States, children from European backgrounds grow up in society where general ideas about what it means to be an American are consistent with their ethnic backgrounds. This makes the process of ethnic identification different from majority and minority populations. And I just wanted to show you this. This strange color of green is native peoples. And as you can see, this is the Navajo Nation right here. This whole chunk, and I guess this is the Apache Reservation down here, down near Show Low. Anyway, this is Indian country, as you can see. Montana this is where Fort Belknap is. This is Fort Peck. This is the Crow Reservation. That's a Cheyenne Reservation, and this is the Flathead Reservation, which is Salish and Kootenai. Anyway, this is Indian country. This area of the Southwest, this area of South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, and this is the reservation in Wyoming. It's Wind River is right there. Nebraska has a bunch in northern Nebraska. This is the Ho-Chunk, and this is the Dakota. And then, as you can see, it's Wisconsin and Michigan and northern Minnesota as well. This is the Mohawks over here. So this is Indian country. Anyway. Identity development for individuals from minority cultural backgrounds involves the resolution of two important issues. They need to come to terms with various stereotypes and prejudices present in society. A stereotype is an oversimplified opinion, attitude, or judgment held by members of a group. A prejudice is a judgment about a group of people that tends to be inflexible and irrational. The stereotypes and prejudices inherent in a society typically raise substantial conflicts in the people to whom they are directed. They threaten their self-esteem and must be resolved to establish a healthy identification with their cultural group. The people affected need to contend with differences in their value system compared to the value system of the majority culture. Successful resolution of these systems typically results in individuals from ethnic minority backgrounds developing a bicultural value system. They use one value system when interacting with people they identify as belonging to their cultural group, and another value system when dealing with the majority culture. This process of cultural identification is quite different for the individuals from the majority culture. White Americans place high value on competition. They view a time as linear and a commodity, much like goods and services. They value independence and support the development of autonomy. The development of these ideologies is often transparent. Members of the white ethnic group are inherently the same as the general view of what it means to be American. This means that white Americans do not have to deal with stereotypes and prejudices in the same way as Americans from minority backgrounds. This is not to say that there are no stereotypes regarding white Americans or that people do not hold prejudices against white Americans. They certainly do. Multicultural education is an educational ideal that students from all racial, ethnic, and social class groups will have an equitable educational experience. James Banks developed a five-dimension approach to understanding multicultural education. According to this approach, five interrelated dimensions drive multicultural education. Content integration refers to how teachers infuse different cultural views into the curriculum being taught. Often, teachers learning from multicultural education focus entirely on this single dimension. They make concerted efforts to discover different cultural factors relevant to a particular discussion and mistakenly believe that this will bring about multicultural understanding. The process of multicultural education is much broader and includes four other dimensions. Teachers need to be careful not to infuse their curriculum in trivial ways. Changes in curriculum to highlight culture might need to be truly integrated. Otherwise, teachers marginalize the content and it is far less effective. Knowledge construction underscores the need to not only teach particular content, but also to help students gain an appreciation of the information source. What we often teach in this area is knowledgeable facts, but this is not just a body of information we all agree is relevant. It is constructed by people and is reflective of the biases and political climate to which it is developed. Students need to be aware of this knowledge construction process. To help students evaluate the knowledge construction process, it is important that some knowledge has been integrated into their curriculum. That's the first dimension. This is one reason these dimensions should always be viewed as highly interdependent. Teachers need to recognize this process of prejudice formation and help students address the issue through prejudice reduction. Often, teachers can reduce prejudicial thinking by providing an example of someone engaging in prejudicial behavior. They can also use direct modeling of such behavior. Children may even engage more readily in such experiential activities. Children look to adults for how to understand group differences. Teachers who present cultural information in an objective and non-prejudicial manner facilitate this type of understanding in their students. Teachers can provide direct instruction in the democratic ideals of justice and equality. Teachers following equity pedagogy have an underlying philosophy that all students can learn with the right support. All educational tools are considered useful depending on the needs of the student. Often this approach necessitates that teachers reevaluate the standard curriculum. Teaching to a diverse array of students requires teachers to be inventive if they are going to find the appropriate tools needed to provide an equitable education. It also necessitates that teachers really get to know their students. They need to talk to them, learning about their daily lives and family backgrounds. The more thoroughly a teacher knows the students, the better able they will be in providing sensitive instruction. Empowering the school culture and social structure refers to school changes that remove any barriers that have traditionally disadvantaged certain students. This is an important part of the overall process. Individual teachers may make significant strides in the implementation of the other four dimensions. However, if the overall climate of the school does not fully support those efforts, it will be difficult to maintain. And that is finally the end. I'm right at the end of the bottom of my can. I almost lost my voice. We will pick this up again next week.